Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Founder Files. Today, I'm going to be talking to Justin Drennan, who is the co-founder and was the CEO of Parcel Ninja after going through his earn-out and exit period to Imperial. And today, we're going to be talking about everything about how he scaled Parcel Ninja. But one thing to know about Justin is that he has also been the investor in businesses like Ozo, Superbalist. He's been the co-founder of Want It All. He's been a co-founder of Insurance.coza. There are so many businesses that he's been involved in, and there's still businesses he's involved in now and plans to get involved in for the next 6 to 12 months, that he's really been around the block in terms of seeing what it takes to start and scale a business. And he is living the dream now in terms of at least my dream of having the autonomy and freedom to do really cool things as an entrepreneur. So in this episode, we get into exactly that. Like, what does the life look like? What does the topic of freedom and autonomy look like for an entrepreneur is the goal that we want to get into. We obviously talk about Parcel Ninja just as a business, the niche that they found themselves in, and the benefits of really solving your own problem as an entrepreneur and then using that to spin off to start another business. We talk about what product market fit actually is and what it actually looks like and what that looked like within his business. We talk about all the different growth strategies they went into, how they started a SaaS platform by taking their unique capabilities, selling it onto the market. We talk about how they expanded the business geographically and went overseas, and how that wasn't necessarily as straightforward, but also doing that in Want It All and not just in Parcel Ninja. We then really talk about some of the mentalities and skills entrepreneurs need, whether it's building a solid network, right? Giving before taking first, making sure that you are having a really robust structure and people around you and support to deal with the loneliness, the doubt, the imposter syndrome. In short, this is an episode that's full of lessons from everywhere from founder psychology, the realities of scaling a business, doing it from multiple different angles. It's full of absolute gold. Now, if you've been following the podcast for a while, we're coming up to the point where we're reviewing season 4 and thinking about season 5. And we really want to get your feedback and insight to start shaping the next season of the Founder Files around what it is that you want to be seeing as an audience member. Now, if this is something that you'd love to contribute to, then please follow a link in our description to a quick survey. Everyone that fills this out is going to get an amazing resource where we've created a database of all the timestamps of all the episodes, but clustered around B2B sales, whether it's scaling challenges, we're dealing with geographical expansion, people, process, and systems, culture, any of these issues that come up within scaling a business. We've taken all of these episodes in the season so far, timestamped all of those different topics, and built out a database of that. So if you want to go down the path of picking out these individual lessons, you're going to get that in exchange for helping us figure out what we should do for the next season. But that's enough for me for now. Ladies and gentlemen, Justin Drennan. Welcome to The Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coots, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Justin, welcome to The Founder Files. In terms of the offline call that we had in preparing for this, you're probably one of the most energetic founders that I've engaged with to date. So I know that this is going to be a really awesome podcast. There's so many stories, there's so many businesses you've been involved in. But although with saying that, we're going to focus predominantly on Parcel Ninja. And over to you, man. Welcome to The Founder Files.
Thanks, Cameron. I'm normally quite energetic. That's a function of probably a little bit of an ADHD diagnosis. So depending on how it is, I like to tune it down a little bit when we go into interviews. But otherwise, things are normally exceptionally quick. I talk really quickly and go. And that doesn't always work. But I think it's ADHD is one of those like superpowers that if you've learned how to harness some of it, it gives you some unique abilities when it comes to business in particular.
100%. I mean, as someone with ADHD myself, and I'm sure a lot of people in the audience can relate, we're going to get into a state of flow here. Our neurodivergence is going to flare off one another, and I think this is going to be epic. So I'm keen to get into it.
Well, there we go. I don't know how many...
Go for it.
I was going to say, I don't know how many founders have ADHD, but I think it's a large portion, I would imagine.
So on that note, actually, I heard from someone recently that there's a statistic of research that was done is of the 5,000 people that they did the research on, of those that were self-employed entrepreneurs, freelancers, etc., 41% of them had some version of neurodivergence, either autism or ADHD, predominantly ADHD. I think that says a lot about people that have ADHD wanting to be their own bosses.
100%. I think that's part of the story, part of the entrepreneurial story, I guess.
So on the topic of Parcel Ninja, right, let's get into that. Talk to me just first and foremost about the business and business model. I mean, this is touted to be one of the biggest exits in South Africa for an undisclosed fee. Let me obviously mention that. But, this is an epic business that you built over a couple of years ago. You've been exited for about a year and a half now, properly out of the business. But just talk to me about Parcel Ninja as a company.
Well, Parcel Ninja is a business that was born out of a need that we had internally first. So it's not one of these businesses that we wrote down a business plan, knew what we were doing, had a SWOT analysis, and went and put down on paper /Excel a whole business model. It was something that came about because of sort of our interactions and processes that we engaged with in some of our other businesses. Parcel Ninja's first client was our own business. So our business called Want It All, which specializes in bringing in products from the US that you can't find in South Africa, had a need. And one of those needs was to ship products locally. Because once you go through the process of importing a product from the US, the last thing you want to do is lose it in the last leg, which was like within the South African context. So you've got something from the US, you put it in a plane, you shipped it to South Africa, you got it to Joburg, and now you don't want to lose it in that last leg. So we had to become quite competent at last mile logistics. And that last mile logistics, when we started many years ago, was underdeveloped in the South African ecosystem. There were a bunch of couriers, none of them really specialized in e-commerce. And us being a bunch of software engineers, went about automating as much as we could in the business. And one of those automations we did was our logistics. So the business started with us handwriting labels every single night in our kitchen and shipping products to people. And soon realized, obviously it doesn't scale, but yes, this is boring. And in that boredom and laziness, if we can call it that, came the sort of opportunity to automate as much as we could. So I always say myself, my brother, and a friend Terence, who started Want It All initially, were quite lazy when it came to a process perspective, and lazy in a good way in that we wanted to automate. And so we built a system that helped us in real time integrate with various couriers, fetch pricing, automate the waybill printing process, which is the sticker you put on a parcel and ship to someone. And through that automation, we ended up having a business that scaled really well, especially when it came to the logistics locally. Fast forward a few years, and we were introduced to Luke and Claude, who were back in the day at a business called City Mob. And City Mob was a business that existed during the heyday of the Groupon clone era. There were so many deal sites running, selling products, etc. And they had pivoted from a business selling vouchers to one doing products, but unique products. So they were doing, it would be like bow ties, or I think they had like bow ties and Christmas crackers and all these like very bespoke, unique products. And as they got to scaling the business, they soon realized that it wasn't really the couriers themselves that were the problem necessarily. It was the internal processes that allowed you to take an order, know what to put in that box, and ship it to them. And so I was introduced to Luke and Claude, to a friend of ours. And through that interaction with them, we decided that, we'd invest in the business with them and help them resolve their logistics through our existing platform that we use for ourselves. And in solving the problem for City Mob, which became Superbalist, we thought, well, if we can solve this for them, maybe there are lots of other people that have this sort of problem. And so we got that right, and then started offering that outsourced warehouse sort of component to other people. And we were just fortunate enough to know some people in the e-commerce space that were looking to scale, didn't want to go build out their own warehousing competency, and allowed us to do that for them. Remembering that we're not actually warehouse or logistics guys, we're programming guys. And so we maybe came at it from a slightly different angle. But we built systems, processes around the capability to do warehousing. And in the same way that we saw a larger opportunity happening internationally with Amazon Web Services and all these outsourced services that you get to a platform, we saw ourselves as like the Amazon, that AWS of logistics. Put your stuff in a warehouse. If you get busy, don't worry, scale up. If you don't need so much, scale it down. So we have a variable price model around how much space you need. The work units of CPU you need is the amount of picking and packing you need. And at the end of the month, pay us for what you use, really. So it's like a model where there's this cloud that sits there where your products are that you don't have to worry about. We integrate with your e-commerce platform. As someone orders off your website, we'll pick, pack, ship it, do everything for you. You don't have to worry about it. And that was really the sort of value proposition or the idea that we had in our heads. How close we got to that.
And just to be clear, you don't also include the actual logistics in the courier at the endpoint. As you'll essentially go in, not necessarily a bidding process, but like outsourcing in terms of who would be the most cost-effective one to do this, and you even automated that as well.
Correct. Yes, that might be a bidding process. We can talk about that later. But basically, we have a panel of couriers, and we say, "Listen, guys, we want to ship this particular product from A to B. Give us the options, please, and pricing." And then we take that, and based on some rules, whether we're looking for time, when we want it to deliver it, if we want eco-friendly or we want it quickly, or any specificities around the courier that's needed, we choose the correct courier. It would print the correct label. It would integrate to the couriers. It would let them know they must come fetch something. And all of that tracking and all that automation is built into the system. So it enabled like small to medium-sized e-commerce players to actually have the same logistics services, if not better, than the largest e-commerce players in South Africa, which is quite unique. And I think a big part of that was the value proposition we saw was that the majority of people that start businesses in e-commerce, they're excitable about the product, the consumer journey, the experience. Talked about packing boxes, not so much fun.
100%.
So the real value proposition is actually not a cost saving around this. It's the fact that you know it's getting done properly, and you can spend your time in your business focusing on what you actually want to be doing, which is finding the right products, selling products, surprising, delighting customers, and focusing on that part versus the mundane picking and packing, which starts off mundane and relatively boring and quickly becomes something that's a hell of a difficult to do at scale. So if you focus your time on scaling sales, you don't have to worry about your logistics. It enables you to scale the business much quicker, which is interesting. And some people bought into that. And those that did, we think, scaled a hell of a lot quicker than most others. And some people who obviously didn't use our service had to go and build out these other capabilities themselves. And I think that in a place where that is almost, I'm not going to say commoditized, where it's not a point of differentiation, like you don't want to own that. So us giving a like outsourced warehouse and distribution model or outsourced warehouse distribution service to almost anybody who wanted to have a startup in logistics was quite compelling. And at the same time, some of the larger guys were starting to get into e-commerce and weren't sure how much money to commit to it or what they wanted to do and how to do it, and gave us that business as well. And once again, allowed themselves to focus on scaling versus logistics.
Yeah, 100%. And it makes me think of like some golden principles that I have around business and value is that if you are making your offering more convenient for someone to consume and you're making their life more convenient and less boring in the process of doing something, then it becomes a lot easier to add value. And I think the point there is that if I also think about the like value chain of an e-commerce business, is like a solid bottleneck on scaling and in volume and complexity is exactly that warehousing, picking and packing moment, because there's so many different variables, especially the more products that you have and the more customers that you have in different locations. There's just so many moving parts and pieces that down to the smallest decisions around how is it that I cluster my different products within the warehouse? How is it that I package them? How close do I put the boxes together? Where are my distribution lines? That when you are selling 1,000 products to 10 to 100 to 1 million, that is a radically different system. And going through that ends up becoming your business, and that is the operational chaos of a scaling business within that space. And to completely outsource that, there's a lot of pain that gets removed.
Correct. And I think that as I said, if you're not going to have any differentiation in it, what's the point of doing it yourself is one point. And I think that, as you said, what we see is people start off with like a small business picking and packing and you're doing it in your kitchen. And so I'm going to get a little bit bigger and you get like another 2 people to help you at your house. And then you go to your garage and then you move from your garage to a little warehouse. And next thing you know, you've got a warehouse that's a little bit too big or too small for what you need. You've got staff that you really don't enjoy managing because it's a whole different story. And you end up like hating the business because of this component that is very different to the rest of the component. It's the least sexy part of a business. It's almost like our business has two businesses under the same roof. One is a cool software dev business where you're solving complicated problems, and the other is you're running a warehouse where you've got to pick and pack products and worry about cleaning, security, staff, theft, all of those sort of things. They're quite different. Health and safety, etc. And those are all very different businesses. And once you start scaling, it gets more expensive and trickier. So as you go to a bigger warehouse, it doesn't necessarily save you money on costs. There are these inflection points along the way where it's more expensive to move to a warehouse. And we've seen this before, and that flexibility that we give, which is quite a critical component, is you don't have to commit to a certain size yourself and sign a 5-year lease if you're doing a warehouse yourself. And that flexibility obviously comes at some sort of cost, which is great. But I think that when you don't know how big your business is going to be or how small or what numbers you're going to be doing, don't commit to signing long-term leases in places that you're not so sure about, only to find out you don't enjoy doing that. And I think that's something that we've seen over and over again. And the orders, the complexity is orders of magnitude larger as you start doubling the number of products. And as the warehouse gets bigger, it gets slower. If you want to pick something in your kitchen, you one step to the left, you pick something, one step to the right, you pass it on. That's quick and easy. Have 1 million products in 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 squares of warehouse. It's a whole different ballgame, and how you lay it out and all of those things. And we wrote the warehouse management system ourselves from scratch when we started because it wasn't available at the time. And let's give it a unique example. Might be that when you walk into a traditional warehouse that isn't built for e-commerce, because you get there and it's racking that's to the roof. It's like 6 or 8 meters high. There's pallets everywhere, and that's what the warehouse looks like. That's completely wrong for e-commerce. E-commerce is how do you pick single units? Single units require a completely different layout, it's a completely different methodology, etc. around all of that. And so we built on the same models that Amazon used, which was chaos storage. And chaos storage just means that you can put anything almost anywhere in the warehouse within reason. But you want things that are diverse next to each other. So if you look behind you, you put books next to your bonsai tree. And why is that? Is because if you put, let's just say, 5 different books on a shelf and you get told to pick book A, there's a high likelihood you might accidentally pick book B because it's a book and it's right next to it.
Yes.
So you can make that mistake. Yes, there's a barcode and all those things, but mistakes still happen. When it's a book versus a bonsai tree. That was actually going to
be my next thought and point is that besides the pain and the headache and the complexity of the warehousing as you're scaling this business, it's also the risk to your customer experience and the cost elements of that involved in returns, not the right product. And even that is, you might have solved the warehousing issue, but now the logistics component of actually still delighting your customer when they deliver the products, there's a whole nother risk element there as well. So it's not just the point of warehousing, there's so many knock-on effects of making mistakes.
And there's so many clever things you've got to build into your warehouse that people take for granted, like I said to you. And if you don't know, you don't know. So like the chaos storage methodology I gave you allows you to pack more density onto a shelf if you want to, and allows you to eliminate mispicking, or not eliminate, reduce mispicking drastically. To the point that if we shipped 1 million products through our warehouse, maybe we get 1 wrong a month, 1 or 2.
Wow.
And work out and let's talk about like the space shuttle, for instance. So the space shuttle is one of the most complicated things humans have built. Let's just say 7 million parts. When you have an error rate of 0.00003, when it takes off, well then, 20 things break. What do you do?
Oh yeah.
So it gives you some sort of idea when you're running a giant machine how minuscule mistakes become real numbers for you to have to deal with. And so eliminating that is something that we spent a lot of time on with best practices and learning around those things. And the ability to weigh and measure products when they come into our warehouse, knowing we put them on the shelf, where they are at any point in time, automatically reconciling shelves on the fly. Whenever a picker doesn't have something to do, it asks them to go reconcile a shelf. That's unique. So your picker sits there and goes, well, I've got nothing to do now. What do? The system says, don't worry, just walk over to the shelf and scan all the items on the shelf, please. And if once I scan all the items on the shelf, it says, okay, go to the next shelf. And so what that allows you to do is all the time you're constantly reconciling shelves to make sure that what's on the shelf is what the system thinks on the shelf, doing it blind. And then what also happens is if there's any errors, it kicks off an error and says, Jimmy scanned product X on shelf Y. It's not meant to be there. Go and investigate to check what's wrong. And then you have an investigation team to check quality of the data within the thing. So it's likened to a IT system, in the old days, a computer hard drive where you need to defrag it and move stuff around within the warehouse to put in the optimal place and double check things for, redundancy checking, and all of those sort of things happen. And then it extends all the way through the picking process, the packing process. When you pack it, do you double check it? Maybe you don't double check it. Do you weigh it? Does the weight that you weighed measure the weight that you thought it's supposed to weigh? To eliminate errors. So there's all these little things that you build in along the way and automate that very few people do, that we manage to get right in our business.
100%. And this is where I guess my ADHD is starting to kick in, because my immense curiosity to wanting to understand everything is like, please explain this methodology to me in simple. And then I remind myself what the whole point of this podcast is about, and that's about scaling. So if anyone in the audience knows any niche podcasts around industrial engineering, warehousing, and optimizing processing lines, please let Justin know, because I feel like he'd have a field day talking to you about the moving pieces of those systems.
So what happens when you want to pack that many books into what box does it go?
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
a question you need to answer. Yes, exactly. So those are box packing problems that you've got to solve upstream in the business, so that you go, we've got these products. What's the optimal box it goes into that makes the reduced cost for the courier? And there's all of those sort of things you've got to calculate as well. And there's so
many variables. There's just so many variables and so many moving pieces.
And I think the principle there when it comes to scaling things is about, like, when you get into an area that you may not know a lot about, etc. At times it sounds easy, which is great, because that's why you do things. Because, like, entrepreneurs have to start things, because if they knew everything that could go wrong, they wouldn't start businesses. First problem.
It's the Dunning-Kruger effect over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. So then the next challenge is, well, once you start scratching in a particular problem, you realize that almost every industry sector there's a depth that you can go to, or the rabbit hole that has diminishing returns, but there's levels of complexity in things that you don't know about. And whether it's, I want to buy a table tennis bat that could cost 200 Rand or 2,000 Rand, or I'm going to build a warehouse system that's going to cost me 50 Rand or 50 million Rand. All of those sort of things exist. And you just got to know where to start, where to stop, how much of it to do, and when to give it over to someone else.
Yeah, no, 100%. I fully agree. And that's the biggest problem with scaling is complexity. And it's not just in one environment around sales and people. It's everything. It's decision-making, it's structures, it's processes, it's systems, it's customer satisfaction, it's market movements, it's understanding the bigger picture. It's not competitors coming for your lunch more because now you're getting bigger. It comes from every angle. So Justin, I want to get into, you've given a bit of the founding story. You've spoken to where the business was birthed from. Just where's the business at now? I mean, you've been exited for about 1.5 years. So I think both questions, where's the business at now, and how's your life right now?
So I mean, being one of the founders of the business, I think there's always some sort of, for me, there's always some sort of attachment to the business, in that I obviously wanted to succeed and continue in the way that I sort of set it up in some degree. In other words, I've set up to do one thing. What it gets chosen to do is a completely different thing. But irrespective of what they're going to do with it, I would like to see it succeed. And the individuals within the organization, the business, are close to me because I've worked together with them for many years, and we have relationships there. So upon exiting Parcel Ninja, I said, listen, if you still need help with anything interesting, let me know, because I'm keen to, I've got a depth of experience in a variety of fields. And if you ever need questions or have anything that you need to ask, give me a shout. I'm happy to do some work. So I think that's one thing. So while I've exited Parcel Ninja, I still get called in to do cool stuff once in a while, which is nice. So I enjoy that. So there's some work we do there, which is cool. So it's nice to have some sort of.
So just to add to that so you're fully exited, but you're still getting pulled in occasionally to bring experience, advice, thinking. Are you not a non-exec on the board?
I'm not, but I'm happy with the I don't want to be necessarily on board level of things, but I'm happy to do some interesting project work, if we can call it that, which is cool.
Cool. The reason why I ask is because every exit story is different in terms of what is the post-exit life of this person, because it's never a complete detachment. It's like you've got more IP and institutional knowledge and just intuition within you about that business than almost anyone. And so the attachment there and the desire to bring you back is always going to be.
I think that diminishes over time, and I think that what we try to do in businesses, or what I've tried to do, is pass on that knowledge as much as possible to as many people as possible, so they don't necessarily need me. But I think it's great to be able to have interactions and discussions with people within the organization around things and maybe think differently or do things differently, or have, because I'm not in the business, see things differently, or being exposed to things that they might not have been exposed to externally, or have other conversations that they maybe couldn't have had with others. And so I'm able to bring unique perspective to some of the problems, which I think is great. And it's not for me to decide the outcome of the problem. I think it's around that process of discovery, problem solving, and just highlighting things and wanting things to succeed and work, which I think is cool.
100%. So for the record, I'm very conscious of my original question, but we are going to go on a quick detour because you raised something now that I'm very curious about, is that from an operational perspective, like really downloading that knowledge and information about how it works is like, that's where processes and SOPs come from. But from a strategic perspective, in terms of like the strategy of the business, understanding the industry that you're playing in, the markets, the customers, all of those needs, and how is it to drive a business like this and set direction for it? How is it that you hand over that knowledge and that kind of thinking to the people within the business? How did you do that?
Well, I think for us, it was a relatively smooth transition in that there was a 3-year earn-out process in the sale of Parcelninja. So, and at the same time, I had already appointed, and there was a CEO running the business prior to that. So we had taken a view, or I had taken a view, myself, Ryan, Terence, the guys, the initial shareholders, well, founders, together with some of the shareholders, which was that we're not necessarily we enjoy building things, creating, selling, etc. I'm not necessarily the best person who wants to be the ops or the COO within the organization. It's kind of like, I guess, like the Google guys, had external help when it came to that. We saw it in a similar sort of way where we wanted to get somebody who's really knowledgeable and competent in the industry, has some sort of engineering understanding, has a financial background, and fits in culturally with us, which is important. And we ended up hiring someone who was the CEO of the business prior to selling the business, which was great. And that's great for 2 reasons. One is, when you sell the business, well, how's the guy that's going to run everything for you? So it's not me, which de-risks things for the purchaser, which is great. And 2, allows you to stay on and still do what you're doing potentially, and not necessarily get roped into certain things that's non-operational, non part of the transition of the business. So we had like a CEO who's running the business, plus a team that he had hired, plus competent individuals. And that weaning process of instilling in them my thoughts and strategy and how we saw things, or what we would do around certain areas of the business, and have those conversations, was something that took place constantly over the years. So when it came to that sort of handing over period, we'll just continue the glide path out in what I'm doing, get involved in some cool things here and there, and avail myself always to be there if they have any queries, questions, or want some perspective on things. And it's not always just because of industry knowledge, but it might just be, well, I want to speak to someone else who's quite smart and sees things differently. Let's have a conversation around that. And so the CEO might call me for some particular thing, but might call someone else to speak to them about something else. Might not be even within the business. And I think that leveraging sort of internal and external parties to do things, I think is of use. And I think that for me, that handover process was relatively simple because of the people that we had in place. And that made a hell of a lot better, I think, in all of that.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's essentially having people part of your team to rely on at any point in time, is because you're no longer necessarily role fixed. You involved and being, which must have been a pretty fun period, I can imagine, because there's nothing totally fixed in terms of what you need to be doing, but you can move around how you like, because the CEO set up their own team for it.
Correct. So that flexibility, I mean, you don't want to get involved. You don't want to get involved and rain on other people's parades, or get involved in things that is theirs. So I think that understanding where those demarcations or boundaries are, but at the same time, knowing that everyone can have open can discussions around anything, and not feel that you have to set up a meeting and go into bureaucratic mode around everything. But just pick up the phone and say, Justin, I was talking to X about Y. I was thinking Z. What do you think about this? How do you see this? Or what have you heard about that? And okay, cool. Give some feedback. Cool. Cheers. And having the ability to have those like quick interactions, I think is something that's undervalued. it's like almost those like water cooler conversations, if I can call it that, which are like serendipitous moments that happen within businesses when they're in the same office. And I think that allowing that to happen, I think, is important. And I think what's interesting about it is that as a founder selling the business is that when you've got the whole management team and everything there tied up in a bow, nicely done, ready to go, it makes your exit process much simpler in everything, which is also great.
100%.
So it's we're just fortunate enough to have it ready and that positioned when it happened. But I think otherwise to go find people, find the right person, or take your existing team and hand over things to quickly enough while that sort of exit is happening just puts undue pressure on you when when there's compliance and regulation, all sorts of other things that happen when you get bought by another large organization that slows things down to it.
So now that you've spoken about what the earnout period was, what's post-exit life like for you? How do you spend your days at the moment? So tell us what the dream looks like, Justin.
I'm not sure if there's a dream, but exactly. And I've been involved in lots of like tech and startup-y things over the years. And people said, Justin, once you've sold Parcelninja, you can't do nothing. You won't be able to do nothing. You have to like get involved in something and do X, Y, and Z. And I said to everyone, well, let's just see what it's like. Like, you can't do nothing. I said, well, watch this. Let's have a look how it goes for a bit. And it's done.
Don't tell me what I can't do. I'm going to do exactly that thing.
Yeah, no. So it's less about, I wouldn't say it's like, but more intentional about the fact that, after building and running businesses over many years, there's like I'm not going to call it like, there's like a sabbatical period almost where you want to maybe get involved in some of the things or investigate some of the things that have like piqued your interest over the years that you haven't had a chance to go down that path, I think is something. And myself, I'm a naturally curious person who enjoys a variety of things. And so in what's happening in the tech and the world, there's always things that are of interest. And for me, now having the flexibility or the ability to have time allows me to spend time with my family, my partner, engage with them on things, which is cool, spend time with kids, schools, etc., which I think is great. So there's a family component to that, which I think I can always work later on again. I think that, and if I look at what I studied, which is IT versus what I do now, which is still IT, like very little of that is completely relevant. Yes, there's some foundations, but within the tech space, every few years, you've got to reinvent yourself again. There's something new coming out. There's something that's changing the paradigm. And you've got to be aware of that. And very few industries have this level of shifting up, I guess I could say, where there's some relevant topics, but there's like fundamentals that are there and lots of other things change. So you've got to be reinventing yourself all the time. So I'm confident that I'll be able to work later in life. And so it's almost like, well, I'm not going to get this time again to do whatever I want to do with friends, family, etc. So how about I do some of that now? And the work stuff I'll catch up in the future if I need to. Kind of is my one component of thinking around that. The second part is there's so many of these new interesting things that I haven't investigated and checked out that now it gives you the time to fiddle and try things. And coming from like an engineering background, you can. So whether it's training an AI model, like we did that like about a year and a bit ago, through to like generating AI art behind me and seeing what's happening, or doing some programming, or getting involved in building an ice bath or whatever's of interest to me, I can actually spend the time and do it, which is quite cool. So diverse interest in lots of different fields allows me to explore lots of different things in my day, and there's plenty to do all the time, which is cool. So I don't tie myself or feel that my persona or who I am is the business, which I think is incredibly important and difficult to do.
Yeah, that is very hard.
And I think that people that associate themselves as a business, etc., struggle post selling a business because that's who they are. That's their identity, largely. I don't have that. My identity is more around I do lots of different things and whatever's interesting to me at the time. That being said, over the last few months, I've got involved in two businesses that are in tech. One is close to like the e-commerce space, a business called Warehouse Dokoza, which does automation of marketplaces. What that means is you can take a product And if you want to sell it on all the marketplaces in South Africa, you can do that exceptionally quickly. So it helps small businesses scale quickly, which I think is cool because I have a passion for SMEs. So that's the one part. And the second part is doing work with a bunch of guys at a business called Happy Pay, which is a payments business that does payments in a more sort of helpful and ethical way, which is really cool. So I have that sort of those two things I'm involved in. But like I also said, that if I'm going to do something else, I can do it in a more planned, measured, intentional way. And I'd like to do a business that like doesn't impact the world negatively. I do it with friends. It helps people. There's all those sort of other things I can do, which I can tick the box with. And if someone comes to me with a business and it doesn't fit those sort of requirements that I have on the list, well, then I don't do it. So I'm quite rigorous in selecting what I do, which is cool.
So, Justin, I love the way that you've explained that, because for me, when I describe the dream of many entrepreneurs, it's freedom, right? It's the freedom to do what I want with my time and money. And it's the way I like to say it is it's we want to have our cake and eat it too. We want to build and lead a great, successful business and have the time and money to live the life that we want to live. And so that's exactly what speaks to the entire philosophy of Metavolve. So our purpose is to accelerate the time it takes to build a great, sustainable business. Our mission is to ensure as many entrepreneurs as possible can take a holiday where they actually switch off and their business keeps growing. And our vision is imagine a world where just 10% more SMEs were able to be sustainable without being dependent on the founders. What would that do for the economy? What would that do for job creation? What would that do for mental health? What would that do for work-family balance, work-life balance, being able to spend more time with your kids, do all that? And so our entire focus is how is it, and we're very niche, right? So there's a lot of things that obviously it's a complex undertaking to do that, but we're very niche on just strategy. So it's how can we help you put a clear strategy together to help you get to that point and have the clarity and confidence that even though you might be in the chaos of scaling now and working really long hours, there's a plan in place to get you to that point rather than just a result that might happen one day. And that's exactly what we're focused on, to be able to give people the autonomy to do the things that they love doing, like you've just said. And thank you for sharing, because that's an inspiration and reinforcement to why I do what I do.
Well, Cameron, I think it's great. And I think that there's so many things to overcome there and so many challenges. And it's like you said, the long hours, etc., are I'm not going to say the different views on it. I mean, I went that path. But I think that a lot of the challenges that happen in the business is like people get addicted to the drama that's happening in the business and all of those things. And to be able to like say it's enough and step out, I think it requires a real like mindset shift in how things go. And I think there's lots of places and organizations that can help speed up this process, like you're saying, and just being able to reach out and speak to people or get advice, or not necessarily advice, even hear the stories of what other people have done, I think is hugely impactful. And if I look back at my entrepreneurial journey, one of the biggest components that's helped me shape who I am and the business was the Entrepreneurs Organization, which is, or EO, which I've been a member of for, I don't know, 12 years probably, somewhere around there. And having peers or like-minded individuals to share some of your sort of trials, dramas, etc. with is usually cathartic, I think. And once you realize that everybody's struggling, it's always difficult, etc. There's like a level of understanding and realization that this is kind of what the story is a lot of the time as well. So I think it's like for me, the entrepreneurial journey is acceptance of some of the things are going to be difficult, and that's the way it is, and that's the journey is part of the part. And the other part is to know when there's like too much of that, and you need to do something about it. And balancing that, I think, is the challenge.
100%. And that's also why, I'm part of Civitas, and these entrepreneurial communities are places where a huge part of it is just to not feel like you're alone. And also at the same time is how can I learn from other founders? The whole reason I actually do this podcast is the fact that as founders, we love to learn from other founders. What did you do in your business? And I'll take those lessons and apply to mine. Right, that's the entire focus of this. So, Justin, we took a moment to speak about your life and situation now, and why I care so much about exactly that. But let's bring it back to Parcel Ninja, right? Because I think that's why the audience is here. Besides all of this amazing stuff in between. So, where we're at in the story now is we know what your post-exit life is. Know the founding story. tell me more about where Parcel Ninja is as a business, because once we get into the scaling now and talking about that, it's like we have to have a reference point in terms of, okay, how big is this thing? How big did it get to? So we know what the challenges you overcame, how pivotal they were to the state. So it's been exited to Imperial, fully owned by them. How would you describe the scale the business is at now?
Cool. Well, I think if I look through the journey of the business, it was one that was started, different guys of form and wanted all, which was, in our kitchen. We then went to a small little office park in Bryanston, which was like 80 square meters. We then moved to a 500 square meter warehouse with offices. We moved to 2,000, 4,000, and I think 6,000 or 7,000 square meter warehouses. So that was like the trajectory of the business. And each of those sort of step changes, we ended up in the sort of business that we happen to be in, which is a bit asset heavy, and that you have to pay for rent for a warehouse. It's like every time you upgrade your warehouse, you move into a big warehouse and you're only using a quarter of it. You're like, oh shit, now it's 75% unused, we've got to sell this fast. And so you go like, you're making money and then you stop making money because you're now losing money because you're in a big warehouse. And then you start making money again and you lose money. So that like step change was always challenging for us. And I think that if I look at what happened in our business and where it is, we grew the business into three components at the end of the day. One was the warehouse and distribution component, where you leave stock with us and we do everything for you. The second part we did is we took our technology that we have that automates the courier pricing, costing, and tracking and made that a SaaS product, which means that if you don't want to move your stuff into our warehouse, don't worry. Take this tool, run in your own warehouse, and it can help you make sure you're paying the best price on courier at all times. So in real time, it'll shop around every single delivery, find the best courier for you, print the label for you, and manage the whole process automatically, which is quite cool.
And so did you spin that off and register it as a separate business? Because that's also, it's like still the IP of Parcel Ninja at the end of the day. Was it just its own P&L? How did you treat
just ran a separate P&L within the organization.
Okay.
And we did that also for multiple reasons, but it was because it worked so heavily with Parcel Ninja and used so much of the IP, it was never seen as like a separate entity. However, Parcel Ninja used that SaaS component within the organization itself. So it was that whole dog food mentality where you use it for yourself before you give it to others.
I love that. Because there's so much in that in terms of how to grow and diversify a business. Like there's different growth strategies that you can employ. And it's like, what's something that you've done that's worked extremely well for you and your clients as a business? Why don't you spin that off as a separate thing that the market that's not actually buying from you because they don't need the whole package can just buy the one thing. And it's like, oh, now we're helping everyone.
Exactly. So I think that was the first part. And what's interesting is I use the term dog fooding, which is a tech term when you use your own product. Which, funny story, comes from, I think, a person. There used to be a dog food manufacturer in the US, and at their company results every year, used to stand in the front, open the can of dog food, take a spoon, eat it himself, and say, "It's this good. I'm willing to eat our dog food. Your pets will be fine." And I think that's in exactly that sort of way too. And it helps us with our sales when we can say, "Well, would you like the SaaS product?" It's not no one uses it; we use it ourselves, and it runs,
exactly.
One of our internal operations, which I think is quite cool. So. And why we did that SaaS product was quite interesting, I think, also is because when you go and you see a customer and say, what we're offering is we're offering this warehouse solution plus optimized courier and all of these things. And then the potential customer says, but I've got a warehouse and you've not got a lease that's gone for 3 years, et cetera, I can't move. Then the answer is, cool, no problem at all. Would you like our SaaS product? Take that, run your warehouse for 3 years, continue to run it forever. If you like it and in 3 years' time you want to outsource your warehouse, come to us. If you don't like it, use this. It's going to save you money and automate your systems. Off you go. And allowed us to sort of capture more of the demand in the industry based on the sort of age or where the potential customer was in their sort of life cycle of business. So I think that was worked quite well for us there, which is great. And then the last part is that we took our business and we went and built out a last mile distribution business in the main market. Main market being classified as, I guess, informal market nowadays. Old days, informal market, now main market. And basically we went together with the guys at Unilever to build out distribution into sponsor shops, which is quite unique. Where it's hell of a complicated.
It's a whole nother level of complexity.
Whole nother level. Salespeople selling products to sponsor shops, order coming back to our system, picking, packing, delivering it the next morning to the spaza shop within 24 hours, collecting the cash, banking the cash, reconciling everything, and making that whole process work. And we built that out at the same time. I think we're doing 700,000 products a month in that process there.
Sure.
Just in that one part of the business. Incredibly difficult, complicated. But like our mantra within the business was, well, if you're going to have clever people, do some difficult stuff at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that. So that's actually that's a great mantra. I'm going to definitely take that and use that internally in Metavolve. That struck a chord. I enjoyed that. So okay, cool. So the state of the business isn't just scale in terms of size of warehouse and number of customers. Is the fact that you've now spun off these amazing capabilities into other businesses and other markets to grow Parcel Ninja to that point, which is fantastic. I mean, again, like there's more than one way to scale and grow a business, and each of them come with their own risk and complexities. So I think speaking to that, but let's go back to the core business.
I'll interject here, Karen. If you want to, I can also go into the Parcel Ninja has actually gone international, and Imperial got bought by DP World, which was an international company, etc., if you want to know.
Yeah, please. Yeah, give me. So, what you're describing here is all the possible, there's horizontal integration is going wide. I'm assuming there were acquisitions. You vertically integrated, you've gone closer to your customers. You diversified by going into a related market with a completely different product. And there's geographical expansion, all the, at least, strategy theory ways of growing a business. Parcel Ninja did all of them. So let's get into it. Talk to me about the expansion one.
So one of the parts that that I didn't cover was also the geographical expansion. So in the acquisition of Parcel Ninja from Imperial was also latest acquired by a company, DP World. And the technology and systems that we built within Parcel Ninja were identified as being of such quality that they felt it could be used internationally. And so there's a drive to use the systems, processes, technology that we have within Parcel Ninja across other areas of the world, whether it's the Middle East and Europe. And basically, if you think about it, all we need to do really is just change the integration with the couriers, and most of the sort of systems work. Obviously, dumbing that down a bit. But I think that at the end of the day, there's this opportunity to expand into other regions, and Parcel Ninja's operating in Namibia, for instance, as an example. So there's cross-border transactions and in other sort of geographies. And whether that's Europe, Africa, etc., it's all serviced out of the same sort of platform and technology stack, which is amazing.
So I want to understand now the complexities engaged in doing that geographical expansion, because as you said, it's the simple answer is same tech, new market, just different integrations. I don't think it's usually that simple. Right. So what are the complexities and challenges you had to handle with taking that to an international market? I think it obviously helped, given the fact that you've got a massive multinational company that's creating the path for this. But but it still came with its challenges.
I think there's a multitude of challenges. One is let's talk geographic expansion component. Secondly is being acquired by a large organization. And in the acquisition by a large organization, I'll start with that and move back to the first point later on. But I think that what needs to be understood is when you sell your business to a larger multinational who is quite rigid in systems, processes, etc., and you come from an entrepreneurial background of being able to almost do whatever you want, there's obviously going to be some sort of friction that happens there. At least I was aware of this through seeing other people that have sold their businesses before in this sort of way, and understanding that this happens, this is what it looks like. And it's almost like you need a team of people just to manage the internal workings of the business and reporting, etc., back to the mothership. And if you think you can do it with what you have, you don't. There's probably a 10 to 15% premium within the organization in just having internal conversations around things and answering questions, etc., etc. But at the same time, there's the opportunity to leverage the large organization from sales system credibility perspective. So you need to do that investment. So something I've seen is that if you're getting acquired by a larger organization or a multinational or someone like that, is to make sure that you have almost like an internal team brought in or a new team developed that helps you manage the acquirer, if I can say that. And I think that makes things easy because in that acquisition process, there's also things that need to change. There's a compliance when this is the accounting system that they use. This is how we report to our accounting. Here's a compliance documentation. This is how you report it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that overhead is real. And so I've seen many founders who've been acquired spending all their time in meetings around all sorts of things that are not aligned to their business necessarily and growth of what they enjoy, and hating that process. So I'll make sure that we had that sort of team set up in order to sell Parcel Ninja into the larger business. I think is important because you need that credibility within the organization. So I think that's something that we saw was quite unique.
So on that, just practically, how was that team essentially structured? Because I'd imagine that there's IT, legal, finance, HR, that those are the main support functions I'm imagining here that are strong compliance, process, documentation heavy.
Logistics.
And now you've got someone who's very administrative. And logistics as well. And so just practically, what kind of people did you hire? What kind of skills? What kind of job titles? I'm imagining that there's people that are very administratively strong now, conscientiousness through the roof, and they just love organizing things. And then, as us as entrepreneurs, is I don't understand how you operate, but I love the work you do. Right. So it's how did you actually practically put that team together? What were the kinds of people? What were the job titles? How did it work?
So I think I'll just talk to some of the overarching themes, which is probably the most relevant I found, which is we need to find people that have worked in large organizations that know how they think, know what they do, know what they like, and is able to talk to them in their language, while at the same time have had some experience within a relatively small business to understand where the rubber hits the road, what it's practically like, if I can say that. So in other words, it's
already a small group
where
of
you
people.
are. Yes, and you need to understand that it's a journey. So where you are versus where you need to get to is a very different place. So when you join, there's compliance and regulation that you need to be in, of which you don't have any of it. Shit. How are you going to get to that is the question. And go along that journey. Whether it's changing your whole accounting system, which we had to do, which is one part.
That's a fun activity.
Correct. All the way through to HR policies and alignment around that, so that it's part of the large organization, the warehouse, and health and safety standards, etc., that had to be adhered to. And they might not only be the ones you're used to in South Africa, there might be international standards. And all of those things. So there's this whole impetus shifts in your business from we're going to go from a high growth business to shit, now we need to become a compliant business, and then you can go back to growth business almost in that way. And so to alleviate that, you don't want to take your growth people and stick them on the compliance stuff because they don't like that, and vice versa. And so finding the right sort of people, both internally and externally, that can help with these things, massive difference in life. And how to do that. It's probably one of the biggest learnings we've had.
So I imagine that's also a very schizophrenic part of the business's journey and evolution, because at the one point you've still got this amazing entrepreneurial spirit that's driving growth and results and making decisions and problem solving. But then there's this new kind of element that needs to really be very procedural, very administrative, very structured and focused. And that can be a clash and a culture clash. So talk to me, even through this change that you're making in the process of being acquired and putting all these new people in, how did you maintain some continuity in the culture of the business at that time?
So I think that one important part you must not forget in that process there is that they've bought the business based on how amazingly well it's growing is one of the components. The technology that you have, the people and systems, etc. And so you can't stop or forego what you're doing because that's the dream that everyone's buying into. However, there needs to be a shift, not only with new people coming in that can help with be the buffer between the two organizations. And what we found is you need both people that are buffering on your side and that side. So you need to find the pragmatic people within the organization on the other side that's also able to meet you a little bit of the way. Because you
so basically just like a human version of an API and just in a team.
Yes, basically. And you need to be able to speak the same language and understand those things. And as I said, be pragmatic and understand how things have been done and how it needs to change. And you've got to manage that shift even internally within the organization where your teams are now, listen, guys, we used to do it like X. We can't quite be as lackadaisical as we were, or we can't quite do it the way we used to do it. Now, credit is done in a completely different way, and risk is managed in a completely different way. Yes, it's slower. Yes, it's this and that, and requires all these extra documents, etc., etc. That's like the cost of doing business nowadays. And while we get that complexity and slowness, we also get some rigidity, safety in the business, because now you're part of a large organization. So you're foregoing the flexibility for the comfort and the safety is kind of like the trade-off that's happening. And some people understand that, and others, it takes a bit of time to get to along that journey. And it's managing through this whole process the whole time, and how it's going, and having a level of transparency, and also the fact that you don't know all the answers when it comes to all these things. And it's like, well, I don't know the answer to that. Let's go find out. Or, well, how do you think we should do it? Or let's go ask A or B. And being able to trust the people on the other side of the conversation to sort of like have the aligned best interest at heart, I think is important, and to build rapport internally and build that political capital within the organization is also important, so that you can get things done if you need to get things done in a certain way, which is also important. So it's like
100%.
Building relationships and all of that from scratch internally is important. And having a great person on the other side of the transaction, I think, is very important for us. We had someone who understood our business, understood tech, understood startups, and at the same time understood how the larger organizations work. And because of that translation that could happen, we were shielded from a lot of the drama, if I could say that. Because you want to do as little of the non-compliance. You want to be fully compliant, etc. But you want to spend as little time on that and spend your time doing what you want to be doing at the end of the day.
And that's focusing on growth.
I've seen many guys sell their businesses, and the business performs poorly because they have to spend all the time on other things.
Yeah, no, 100%. And look, I think regardless of the type of business, is that when you are scaling and growing to a certain point, you need to start bringing in certain compliance procedures, standards, SOPs, etc. Because that's without those things break with complexity. And our prime example, there's a client of ours that we've literally just finished up in terms of their strategy development. And what they're busy doing now is they're based in the Netherlands, but they're going to be expanding across Europe and into the US as well. So they do all of the fiber cabling for Google's hyperscale data centers. And so now they're doing that in the Netherlands, across Europe, and expanding into the US. Part of the strategy of what they're executing is going to be, what are the processes, systems, the standards we need to be putting in from our operations, from people. They're bringing in external HR to help them with making sure they've got standard recruitment processes that are working with labor lawyers in each of these different countries to make sure things are properly set up, and health and safety. And it's just the necessity of them realizing that if we don't do this, it's going to be chaos, because we're going to have to solve the problems, all right? And we're going to have to figure that out, and we're not the experts on this. So 100% love that. But obviously there's the next level, and this is I imagine it's still a relatively painful adjustment of an entrepreneur, just naturally in terms of our DNA, if you will. But corporates are so good at this. And I think there's an element of if you lean in and just please show me how to do this, it's a much smoother process. And I mean, this is my experience having started my career in corporate, getting frustrated by this because I just want to move fast. Coming into entrepreneurship and then seeing it from both sides is like it's a balancing act. And if you get it right, then you've got a really amazing business that can do it all.
Don't forget that the mindset shift needs to be, what that word for me is, that compliance becomes a point of differentiation and a selling point.
Interesting.
In other words, it's, don't worry, your stuff's with us. We are compliant with X, Y, and Z, A, B, and C. You know that you aren't. By moving it with us, check out all this amazing stuff that you're now compliant with. Yes. And you'd be surprised, reg tech, regulatory technologies or those things. It's like there's a level of comfort that larger organizations have, knowing that we're part of a larger organization and that there are these systems, processes, procedures, etc. in place. So when you're selling to SMEs or when you're selling to startups, yes, that's cool. It's move fast, do things. When it's selling to larger organizations, it's the meticulous nature of things, the fact that it mustn't break, consistency, etc., is actually a selling point. So it's just realizing
this is super predictable.
There we go. So it's you don't want to break stuff. It's like nobody got fired hiring IBM used to be the old saying. In other words, but we gave our stuff to the best guys that are the most compliant and whatever. There was nothing better we could have done almost in that way. And I think that being able to sleep at night also, as an entrepreneur, knowing that all of your stuff has systems for us and things are working is also good. A lot of the time, you think that you've got certain things covered only to find out later that you were completely wrong. Whether it's insurance policies or industrial or health and safety compliance, etc. All those things, a lot of people glaze over in their businesses, not knowing how much of a risk it actually is for their business. And when you speak to them and you suddenly explain that, listen, you've got that, but it's not actually right. Let me show you what we do. Then it allows you to sell that as a point of differentiation. Like when you move your stuff to the cloud with Google, it's like, they're going to be there, yes. If I move it into a random company where I'm going to upload all my photos, I'm not sure where it sits. And so we're in the business of trust to a large degree in that place there. And we're such an integral part of people's business that they want to know that things are done right. And so that compliance becomes a point of differentiation in our service.
That's a very interesting way to look at it. So we've gotten into the complexity of integrating with a corporate. And for me, it's always such a fascinating lesson because it's so much of the not fun stuff, but it's the absolute necessary stuff to make such a really robust, sustainable, and profitable business at the end of the day. And giving some of your stories have been super valuable. But the other side, now let's get back into the exciting stuff. And everyone's like, let's go overseas. Let's take this internationally. Let's go conquer the world. So talk to me about the geographical expansion side of this and, the challenges that you faced in doing that.
So when it came to the Parcel Ninja business, the geographic expansion happened predominantly post my sale of the business. However, it was on the radar while we were in the organization. That being said, I do have an example in our Want It All business where we decided we're going to go do some work abroad, which is quite interesting. And in the same way that we brought products from the US into South Africa, we spent a bit of time in Brazil, and it was a similar market to South Africa, which is interesting. And we decided we're going to set up a business in Brazil doing exactly the same thing we do in South Africa, run it from South Africa, website, etc. We've got some guys that can help us there, and we're going to set this up. And there were like a number of, at the end of the day, failed hopelessly, which was cool. Lost lots of money, but learned a few things, which is great. And we actually post that failure or learning, create a document. There's some of the things we must remember when we go overseas again, that if we decide to go overseas, let's just bring up this document and check some of this as a DR plan or disaster recovery plan. And the reason why you have a disaster recovery plan on paper is so when the disaster is happening, you don't have to think. You just pull out the paper and read, and tells you what to do. And the same can be said for some of the learnings that we have when we mess things up properly. It's great to just write down some of those learnings somewhere so that when it comes up again, just double check some of these things because you probably forgot. And we did that often for Black Friday. So at the end of every Black Friday season was, okay, guys, what worked, what didn't work, write this down. So now 3 months before next Black Friday, we go back to this list to double check. Yes. And some of these things are so fundamental, we're going to be changing it all the time. So let's just set up the operating manual and iterate through a process of gearing up for this thing called Black Friday, which was completely new in South Africa. And so every time we did it, we just got better and better and better and better at Black Friday, where now it's just we know what to do. Year 1, we don't know what to do. Year 7 is we've got this down because we just took what we did and added a little bit to the recipe every year, and it got better. And we literally codified that into a document, which I think is cool.
So on that note, just to do a bit of a share from our side, is there's 4 questions that I use in everything that we do, especially when we're doing something novel, but we do it in every session that we have with a client at the end of it. And it's the question of what went well, what could have gone better, what have we learned or what's been reinforced for us, and moving forward, what are we going to be thinking about or doing differently? And I find that those are the fastest ways to get to what the core reflections are that you need to be able to take away for when we do something next time. That's something that we can reference back to.
There we go. And something you can do after a meeting, I think is quite relevant as well.
Exactly.
Not just the preparation before, it's the afterwards, So I think being mindful that you can do better, and then putting in the effort to put this to get better, and bringing the team together in the various areas that you need to improve in. So the document has each of the departments and what's happening. And then every year we just go back to the previous version of it, tick off the stuff we did, et cetera, and build the roadmap for things. It just makes life so much easier because you don't have to think about it. Because sometimes you have really good ideas and then you forgot that shit. Last year we did X. We should have done that again. Don't worry, it's in the document. So the same happened for our Brazil expansion in the same way they'll talk about Black Friday, and that we wrote down some things that we got to remember when going to other markets. And some of the fundamentals, I think, for me was around like the complexity of time zone, I think is interesting because it's something people take for granted. It's like, a little bit early, a little bit later here and there. It adds up the time zone. We found was quite tricky. The language barrier was, I think, being a different language just makes things slower when you're having to work through sort of an interpretive approach. And with that language barrier, I think there's like a cultural nuance that people don't take into account in other geographies. So don't think that everyone thinks the same way that we think. In the same way, don't think laws are the same either. Always bear in mind. So things that you take for granted, you must just work out which ones you mustn't take for granted and rethink from first principles on some of these things. In other words, which we thought was quite interesting. And in getting just, I think, some of those components right, and I'm not going to like heavy details of all the things for geographic expansion, but it's trickier than people realize, and the strength is in the partnership or the people that you have on the ground there. And we've seen that in a few businesses, whether it's you need to have a US address, a telephone number, and speak, the correct accent based on the area you're in within the US, so that you look like an American company, etc. So if you want to be doing something, you have to have those basics covered. If we were going to go to Brazil, we'd have to have certain other things covered. There would be like certain legislative things. Brazil happens to be the most expensive country in the world to import products, highest duties in the world. And if you don't go through a specific way of importing them, which back in the day was maybe not compliant, if I can call it, is like not the right way to import things, is how people used to import things. But you have to go to make the decision, do you want to be doing it that way? Which we said, no, we don't. Which then means, well, then you're more expensive and you have all these regulatory hurdles to go through, meanwhile the other guys aren't. And from that perspective, we said, well, we don't want to do business in a place that requires us to do those things. And so we decided not to do it. But if we maybe spend a bit more time working those things out, we wouldn't have gone there. But at the same time, if you don't, sometimes like the naivety in doing things is where the magic happens sometimes as well. So it's like, how do you balance or juxtapose those two ideas? And it just reminds me of a thought principle of when solving a complicated problem. Is people if we've got a hell of a complicated problem, so we're going to build a road from San Francisco to Las Vegas. And along the way, you have to go through these huge mountains. Like, shit, we don't know how to do that, but let's start the road. So when we get to the mountains, we'll figure that out. The other way to think about it is you start at the mountains. And if you can't figure that out, don't even bother building the road. Is the other way to think about it. And so it's like an inverse of how some people approach problems. And if there's some exceptionally difficult component in a whole implementation, start with the most complicated thing first before you bother with the rest. Because if you can't figure that out, it breaks the entire chain. So I think for us, it's identifying those is what we do before we go do anything now.
So our best way to use that, and it's the tool Porter's 5 Forces, which I know every time I say that, a lot of people switch off immediately because it's a very academic thing that I thought about in university. I love the fact that you have used it now. I want to get into how you did it now, but the reason why I think about it is that when product market fit is emphasis in this market that we're in now. The moment you go to another country, it's a very different market. So if you're going to go to the Netherlands versus Brazil, right, and you're going to be a logistics or warehousing company or e-commerce player or distribution, it's fun. In Netherlands, you've got to deal with bicycles, right? And then in Brazil, you've got to deal with favelas and other natural complexities.
Payments that are completely different. Boletos.
Yeah, I know nothing about Brazil. But the point there is that it's the questions that you need to ask. And obviously, if you look at the tool of Porter's 5 Forces, I mean, anyone can Google it and go find it. Just try find a version where the questions are not in absolute consulting jargon. But the point there is that it's what does competition look like here? Who are the competitors and the rivals here compared to where it is in our current environment? what substitutes do they have for our offering in terms of meeting their needs? Because it's going to be very different here compared to there. So, for example, like thinking about a taxi, getting a taxi in Cape Town and in South Africa versus getting a taxi in the Netherlands. The substitutes here are not necessarily a bicycle because things are way further apart versus the Netherlands. That's always going to be the case. That's just a rudimentary example. But what does customer power look like? How much bargaining power do they have over what it is that's going to be purchased?
Who's got the power
what are the barriers
pricing?
to entry? Who's got the power of the pricing? Yeah. What are the barriers to entry? It's like, why are other people not doing this? It's like, what are the things that are preventing them from doing this? And how are we going to overcome those? And then finally, it's like, who are the suppliers? Who are the people that are going to enable this in the first place and allow us to be able to do this? And the thing is, people don't think through that because they get through a moment of overconfidence. We've nailed it here. And operationally, don't get me wrong, it will probably be the same. But the market and the fundamentals that allow the business to operate within an ecosystem are completely different. And I think that's what, whenever I hear people talking about geographic expansion not going so well, it's because of those complexities there. And I think Porter's Five Forces covers like 80% of it. It won't be all of it. A lot of it is this cultural nuance, like you mentioned, around like speaking the right accent. It's like you can only know that by actually being there and making the mistakes. But there's a certain element that you can be proactive around in terms of realizing where I'm making my assumptions or not, and making sure that I'm at least prepared in terms of not pretending that I know the answers and knowing that I should go find them before doing this.
Like you're saying there with your assumptions, like we said, is like start with first principles a lot of the time and get rid of some of those assumptions and go work things out. So if you're assuming stuff, rather don't, I think is interesting. And
yes.
I went to a talk once, I think it was like one of the heads of like Pizza Hut and their global expansion strategy. And he's like, there's certain components to a pizza. And if we go into another country, there's the brand, let's just say, there's the restaurant, what it looks like, there's the pizza base that you have, and then there's the toppings. And if we have to change more than one of those, we're not going. It's kind of their view. Because then we're not taking our same product there. Then it's like too different to what we know and what we do. And I thought that was quite an interesting way to look at it, together with the fact that if you can't like dominate your home turf, then you've got no chance. Well, then it's very difficult to do that in another country.
Yeah, that's right. It also just makes me think of like there's some people that I worked with when we had a partnership with an accelerator, and they were telling me that they wanted to expand into 2 different countries at the same time. And when I asked them how much market share they have in their existing country, and they're like, oh, like 2%. Well, why are you going overseas?
Yeah, I think if you can't, that means if you haven't got the product market fit for your local market, where you have all the advantages of home turf, you've got the network, the currency, you understand the culture, the people, you understand everything around it, and you can only still get the 2%. Well, like maybe just think about that a little bit. I'm not saying it's unheard of, but don't use these cases of these extreme cases where people get it right to think that's how it is for you. Don't use the outlier as your basis to do something a lot of the time.
100%. So on the topic of product market fit, right? So it's a concept. Everyone's confident about what it means, but then it's like, what does it actually look like? And I'm like, people often get blank stares, right? So in your business, right, in Parcel Ninja or any of the ones that we've been discussing now, whether it's Once It All, some of the businesses you've invested in, just what does product market fit actually look like?
I remember listening to a podcast where guys were talking about product market fit once, and they were telling a story which resonated with me. And this is many years ago. And the summary basically is you've got product market fit when people phone you for your product. And word of mouth drives a large portion of your product to start with. And they found it in the similar way that we found our SaaS product, where it's like, check out what we've got. We're selling you this warehouse. And the guys, we love your warehouse, but we actually want that other part there. Well, no, you can't have that. That's part of the whole machine. And then after you hear that 50 times, eventually you go, maybe they actually want that also. And in that, we found, I think, more of a product market fit or an easier sell. That being said, our business was aimed at higher end, larger organizations. So it's different to like selling to SMEs. But that view or message that I heard on that podcast still resonates today. It's like, that's what product market fit. You show someone something and they're like, let's go tomorrow. You don't have to go through hoops and, we'll try to find this. Like, I'm getting X on the call now because we want to show them this thing quickly. That's amazing. That's product market fit for me, I think. And it's very rare to see it. And it's not, obviously, you can't be all things to all customers. So I think it's like also a function of who you're seeing. But that gave me some idea of what product market fit versus you trying to shovel something down someone's mouth. Oh, but you do need this. But can't you see why you need this? Etc. Which might be valid. And they don't see it from your perspective. They don't know what's possible. But it's like when it's so simple, makes so much sense, can add so much value that it's like almost like the decision is made there for the product.
100%. And look, I get the exact same experience in MetaVolve is that most of our new clients come from referrals. And often there, when we are signing up a new client, it's our buying cycle is like 2 weeks, right? And from first meeting and then needs assessments and analysis, figuring out what's going on, contextualizing this proposal, go. And I'll never forget that one of our clients we signed up recently, on the same day that we submitted the same morning, we gave them they gave us the invoicing details, submitted the invoice, and then after that we got paid within 8 hours, right? So and then immediately signing up going the next week. And my curiosity obviously kicks in is like, this is often a process where for a lot of people there's still this getting over the line element. And it's happened about like with 3 or 4 clients where it's just 100%, I'm in, this is exactly what we need right now. Cool. And I'm like,
isn't it?
And I'm still in and this is why I know we don't have product market fit, but because it confounds me, is the fact that we have those customers and all of them have got different problems and reasons why they came to us in the first place, but like it's the same like behavior. So I sit here and I'm like, I guess I just need to wait and be patient and get more data to figure out what's actually going on and how I can replicate that with other people and focus it on there. So it's this combination between super exciting but really frustrating because like it's happening and it's evidence that we're on the right track, but like it's not enough for me to know I can replicate this multiple times.
Yeah, and in the replication, I think it's like you've got to decide, as I said, when things start, maybe it's the normal 2 things that don't scale, maybe to start things off and be part of every meeting and get the insights from it, etc., etc. And it's almost like being able to filter through all the meetings that I've had, sitting with 5 clients, potential clients a day, signing up naught, hearing what their real problem is, and talking less and hearing more, and just asking questions. Yeah. So it's never, we're sitting down with you, and this is what Parcel Ninja does. It's like, listen, before we start anything, I know that you got referred, etc. Tell me about your business. How does it work? What is happening? How do you deal with X or Y?
That's exactly how we do it, is because I know I'm confident in strategy, but it's also like, I've known nothing about your business. You're the expert on your business. I'm never going to tell you how to run it, but like what's going on? Why are you here? What is it that you need? And it's the same thing. And I'm the person that has those conversations, but I'm still sitting here and it's like this, like it's, when you feel this close, but yet so far at the same time. And it's just once you figure it out, everything's going to unlock. That's where we're at now.
Yeah, I don't know if you figure out that one thing that unlocks everything, but I think that people give up right before they're almost there a lot of the time. And perseverance and grit is a superpower as well to do things. And I think that
100%.
That if I look at like when we started Want It All in 2007, and we were like software engineers, so we didn't have any network or business people or no much. Like the first 3 years were just spent meeting people in the industry. That was it. Meeting fellow e-commerce people and sharing stories and helping each other grow and forming friendships and relationships. And some of those people that I met back then are still like friends of mine today that we met through this like e-commerce journey. And I think that authentic sort of process where people want to help each other. Oh, so listen, thanks for telling me about your business. I don't think we're really the fit for you. Have you spoken to X or Y? Because I think they've got A, B, and C. And that's cool. And when, if you have problems with this or that in the future, let me know. But that's also cool. And seeing that as part of the opportunity, because it's building out the network of credible people and people that see you as a thought leader where you actually add value to their business, not trying to sell them a product, I think is valuable. And sometimes having a big tool set of people, products that you can refer them to that's not necessarily yours comes around eventually, we find.
And you just said something that really clicked and reinforced for me the big difference between being part of an actual entrepreneur's community, like Entrepreneurs Organization, like Civitas, like YPO, for example, versus going to events around entrepreneurship and startups, is that when you go to the events and you're engaging with people, it's a status and transaction competition. Who's the most important person that I can speak to now and engage with and try carry on or at least get a sale? It's very transactional. But in my experience with Civitas is that's completely disappeared. It's human beings interacting with human beings, and how can we actually build a relationship? And it's from the latter that you get what you just described, is engaging with people in the same industry, engaging with other founders, other entrepreneurs. What is it that you're going through? What is it that like you're experiencing? And what is it that you actually have? So that, like you said, is like, oh, you're going through ABC. This person does D. Like, go for it. Right? That only really happens once you've built a proper relationship. And I feel like that for me is, again, a huge value for being part of these networks, is that you actually get to build real relationships with people.
And for me, what's worked hell of a well is just this concept of paying it forward. Works often. Like often I've connected hundreds of people together that have gone on to do lots of businesses and deals and transactions. I don't expect or get anything from any of those, but you'd be surprised how many of those come back to do other things with you, if I could say that. And there's nothing, it doesn't hurt to connect other people together and identify those opportunities. And I think the term used to be like a maven or a connector along those lines, but as I said, being able to just remember or keep in mind all of the people, what they do, and how you can connect these people together that won't necessarily benefit you, but benefit your broader community and network, lifts up your whole network at the end of the day and comes back to you.
100%.
Which I think is cool. And I think that's the way that I've always done things, and you'd be surprised how much of that comes back over years. So it's like life and entrepreneurship is a long-term game. It's multiplayer. You want to play with lots of people that you like, people that enjoy, and you want to do it together with them. And I always joked with people I know, like friends, that I said, like, there's no point in one friend being rich. It doesn't help anybody. It's like if one person retires amongst your group of friends or something for whatever reason, was hugely successful, it's like that is amazing. Don't get me wrong, but in my experience, I want like all my friends to be like that. Exactly. I want to be able to hang with all my friends and do all the cool stuff with them, and then be part of the journey with me. I don't want to leave anybody behind, is my view. And I think that if you can go in with that sort of level of altruism to do things, I think everybody helps everybody else, and that's the natural tendency for people to be doing things.
I fully agree. There's even a book about it. So if anyone's heard of Adam Grant, is his first book that he released. But I've actually got one of his books right here. So this is Think Again, which is really cool. Basically, the synopsis of it is we run our lives on a lot of assumptions and biases, and it's how to spot them and actually think. Again, it's literally in the title. But his first one was give and take, and it's a difference in reciprocity styles between givers, matchers, and takers. And it's about how successful are people in the short term versus the long term. And takers, basically, their response is very transactional. It's like, what can I get from you? And I'm not really going to reciprocate back. They win massively in the short term. But what happens is they become that asshole that no one ever wants to work with, and don't work with that guy, right? Versus givers, they actually lose a bit in the short term because they're spending so much of their time helping other people. It's like, yo, how can I give you this advice? What can I do for you? Like, let me give you my time for free with no expectation of anything in return. But in the long run, they've got the most robust reputation and network of people that are actually trying to help out and be like, how can I help you? Like you do so much for nothing, right? In terms of helping other people. You're such a good person. Everyone, you should meet this person. You should help them. And this is in like studies across corporates. This is studies of entrepreneurs. This is studies of multiple professions. Anyone with that natural reciprocity style usually succeeds in the long term just because of the network that they have.
And I think that in reciprocity is disproportionate. So I think that some of the studies done, the psychology of influence, as Robert Cialdini, I think is the name, and he does the study basically, which is the principle of when you give something, you get back disproportionately more. So it's like, everyone talks about that sort of principle. It is actually in practice how it works. And one of the studies they did is they said, there's a lecture, and at the beginning of the lecture, the guy buys a $1 Coke for everybody. And later on, he asked them to buy lottery tickets. And on average, they would buy $5 of lottery tickets. If you didn't give them a Coke, They'd buy $2 of lottery tickets. So the cost of the Coke being $1 lends them into getting more. The principle is not to be abused, but the principle is that you get disproportionately reciprocated for things that happen in the world. And I think that in business, those sort of things happen as well.
100%.
And you'd be surprised how much, and you'll never know all the opportunities you missed because they did not refer you. People did not refer to you. Those you do not know are happening. You're just unaware of them. And I think coming back to your principle, the takers miss all of those, and they do not know they're missing all of those is the important part. So I think to be helpful, help out, and be of use to the broader community, I think is important. Obviously, there's limits to what you can do, but I think that principle has always worked well for me, and it's enabled me to be able to pick up the phone and speak to almost anybody that we need to, or find through 2 or 3 degrees of separation almost anybody in the world, which is cool.
Yeah, it's just it reinforces for me to keep keep doing that. It's something that's a natural skill that I sometimes forget to hone. Out of honesty, is like I end up meeting so many people that it's also the basics of like how to win friends and influence people, but it's just the memory storage required for that many people and that many connections is a skill and it's a practice. And thank you for reinforcing for me that it's a worthwhile one.
And they talk about how your brain, by the way, and how social networks and how taxing that is on your brain and how many close friends you can have because of it and the studies around that. It's like keeping track of all the networks of all the people and how they interact together is hugely taxing and difficult. And that's like one of the most complicated things the human brain does, actually. Because every additional person you add is exponential to the complexities and the connections.
That's also why scaling a business gets exponentially more complex. The more people you add, the more hectic it gets. But to actually pull that back, because that just hit me with an idea now. So my first thought was like, but isn't that why CRM exists? And I was like, oh, there's a whole nother product there with in the old days, people would just have their black book of like contacts, people, names, numbers, birthdays, etc. How can we find a way to more intuitively digitize this with the people that we meet and some of the facts that are going on that aren't like note heavy? I don't know. I don't know if that exists. Anyone listening to this podcast, maybe there's an idea to go create to help people network better. Essentially a CRM for the world. Anyway,
Facebook.
Moving on.
Sounds Facebooky. It's a social network there.
Yeah, no. Thanks, Justin. I felt like I was onto something, and then I felt really stupid afterwards. I absolutely missed
Burst
it.
the bubble.
I had that moment. It was like, oh, this is a novel concept. So no one's ever done this before. And it's like, that's
there's someone else doing it.
Cool. So, okay, there's another topic that we obviously aligned on beforehand that we haven't really got into, but there's talking about mentality, right? And from the difference between building versus growing, like going from, being in a growing stage, being in a scaling stage, being in a startup stage, these come with different mentalities. And I was very curious about this when you brought it up, because I think you as you said, you've got some good thoughts on this. So just unpack it for me in terms of, firstly, like how do you define the difference between building versus growing? And then what's the mentality difference between the two?
Well, I could just talk to the experience that we had in our business, which was a bunch of guys and people that come from a software engineering background who like solving problems. When you're like an engineering person, you like solving problems. Well, the world's full of problems and everything can be done better. Whether it's how long you queue to, like the best way to make a cup of coffee, through to logistics and all things in between. So you're constantly running around looking at problems and thinking how you can be doing things better, which means that you can be iterative, or you can be improving or building systems all the time. However, in your business, you've got to really define what the problem is you're going to be solving and not grow the thing out to be all things to all people. I think it's something that we did really well in our business. And my brother has been the sort of biggest proponent of that, which is amazing. In other words, and it's like building complicated systems is easy. The easiest thing in the world to build complicated systems. Building simple systems, well, that's another story altogether. To make it simple, like simplicity is the ultimate sophistication at the end of the day. So how do you take these things that are hell of a complicated and really dumb it down, for lack of a better word, to like a simple way of doing it, or simple processes, which I guess has been the mantra for your Mac or iPhone, etc. At the end of the day, you have the one side is like, let's juxtapose the like Android where you can fiddle and change everything, and iPhone where certain things are just done the way it does, and that's how it works. You can't change it because they've defined that's the best way. In other words, Henry Ford said, if you ask everybody what they wanted a Foster horse. It's like not a car, and you don't get, the other saying is like, you don't get to a light bulb by iteratively improving a candle. Are the two things that I heard, which is quite interesting. So in that same way, it's like when people are asking you to add stuff on, if don't you have this feature, don't you have that feature, etc., is to work out what is actually core to the system, what should you be adding, and what should you be not adding and removing. And the question you should always be asking is, what can I be taking away from the system? Not what can I be adding. In other words, to invert the problem. And in asking those questions allows you to build a system that does probably a little bit less, just hell of a well. And those other extreme use cases that you end up building for are such outliers that doesn't actually have a material impact of your business. So it's the willingness to go when you're seeing someone and say, oh, can you do X or Y? I say, we don't do X or Y. This is what we do. It's like we're a can opener. We only open cans. We're not a paintbrush,
Yes.
And a fridge and all these things together. This is the problem that we're solving, and we're very focused on this problem, and we do this hell of a well. And yes, we understand you have all these other problems. Not our problem to solve. That's someone else. I can refer you to those. This is what we do. So it's cool. So take it or don't take it. But when you start adding all these other complexities to your product, that's when the drama starts. Because you probably didn't start with that in mind. You haven't to shoehorn or add all these little things to it that don't quite do what you want to do in the right way. You haven't thought about it necessarily well. And all of those things. So it's just to be hell of a focused on your thing. And when you add something in, is how to add it in a way that covers as many use cases as possible, yet be as simple as possible. And I think, if you look at the magic that we had in our business, that I think was a critical part. It's how do you take this whole big thing, which is warehousing, logistics, supply chain, and package it into a hell of a simple system. Tell us what you're sending us, tell us your orders, and we'll tell you what stock you got. 3 things. That's all we do in the whole business, really. And we're able to package it in such a nice and simple way that it just works. And that sophistication of being simple, I think, is like a critical part of the success of the business. And focusing on that, I think, makes a big difference and allows you to take the next step, which is what we've got here is good enough to sell. It might not be, I think there's talk about sometimes a ship, something that you're a little bit ashamed of, or, something along those lines.
That only applies at MVP.
Only applies to the MVP. I would agree with you there, but you've got to ship an MVP or something that you're a little bit squalm about, learn through that process. But the fact that it doesn't do everything, you've got to be okay with. That's what we found. And so this is what it does. Once we've built this, we're not going to build a better mousetrap. We're not going to make this 1,000,000 times better. We're just going to, this is what we've got here. Our sales team should be able to sell. If they can't sell this, we've got a problem. And saying, cool, we've moved out of building mode. So we've got software engineers and building thing. So now what we need to do is we need to onboard clients and sell the product. So we need to get less developers, more sales. From the initial build, then move to sales. And for us, that shift from a product building-led organization, which is cool, to maintain that product focus, obviously, and to a sales-led organization where what happens with sales feeds back and we see what we need to do, was one of the big shifts that we had to undertake in our business, which led to the success of the business, I think. The levels of success we had, I should rather say.
Yeah. And I think one of the hardest parts from a mentality when you're in growing or scaling mode is no and not yet, right? Because it's so easy to say yes to these opportunities. But the problem with that is it's what are our most finite resources? It's money, time, but actually mostly attention. And the problem is that if you are thinking about all these new markets you could be going for, these new opportunities, new problems you could be solving for, these new products you could be developing, you're now at a point where your business has just gotten to a point where it's the most easy to make it really grow and profitable. And the distraction of the shiny stuff, because it's fun, because you like building, you're an entrepreneur, solving problems, this is what we do. But the distraction of the intention there means that if we just had the bit more impulse control to focus on this core business, right, to make sure that we're solving the same thing over and over again really well. As you say, our sales team is really empowered to be able to sell this really well because they know it so intimately, and then our employees able to deliver it so consistently because it's just this well-running machine. That once that's there, can you get this business to be able to run smoothly without you having to problem solve everything? Now let that be the 80-20 principle. Now let that make the business 80% of its money. And now you go focus on the other 20% and have your fun experimentation with whatever it is that you want to be doing. Okay, and this is the point of emphasis. And I just want to check my tone here, because I'm not saying, oh no, don't do this. But we're founders, right? We want to be able to do the exciting things, and we're very creative people. But it's more the fact is, like, how can you have that, go back to what I said earlier, with a sense of freedom, where you can do what you want within your business or outside your business with your time, is make sure that you have empowered a team around you that can run this thing properly, so you can spend most of your attention now on the stuff that you want to be doing. And I think the problem is I see so many people struggling at that point because they want to have it all too quickly.
Yes, and I think there's something you said about like learning those skills as an entrepreneur also, that you need to upskill yourself in certain areas as well. And some of them are critical to the success. You need to have some understanding, or you need to be competent in finance. You need to both be able to build a product and sell a product. You need to be able to scale a team. And all of these are part of what a holistic entrepreneur looks like. And of course, there's teams involved, etc., and co-founders, and different competencies can be handed over. But I think that an overarching concept of what's happening in all of these is critical. And it's almost like the entrepreneur has to be that jack of all trades kind of person, and multidimensionally skilled. And I remember reading the one book was around specializations. The specialization is for insects, was almost like the saying. And it's around, you must be able to do a diverse range of things. And you need to be able to be aware for yourself that there's it's time to shift gears from whether it's a wartime CEO or whatever it looks like to something else. And now you need to go, we've built the product. Now it's sales hat on time. How do you build a sales team? And not everybody can do that, but the great guys are able to do those things or find the right people to do that with. It's hell of a difficult to hire a great anything if you don't know what that looks like yourself, if you've never been exposed to it. 100%. So I think a lot of the time is to be exposed to amazing people gives you some concept of what amazing looks like. You know, if you haven't eaten at a 3-star Michelin rated restaurant, well, how are you meant to know what that tastes like? You can watch see the pictures, etc. Until you've worked with an amazing, phenomenal salesperson, you're always higher below the par in that way. And so I think that you've got to have these like personas in your head of what amazing people look like in particular industries. And so I want either that person or I want someone that's similar to that person and be able to go after that. Or and I think that's having that persona in your head of what success looks like for those categories, I think has been a way for us to sort of identify and hire the people that we want. And obviously the culture and those things need to be part of that at the same time. But like outsourcing sales, it doesn't fly, I've seen. And at the same time, no one should be selling better than the CEO or the co-founder or the founder of the business.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's also the point of where founders try to remove sales from their responsibility too early, and things that immediately becomes a bottleneck, because at the first point of sale always is passion, right? A lot of people just buy from you because you're so passionate about this and you're so confident about this, and you're throwing language at me that I don't understand, but like just because you're so passionate about this, I feel like you can do the job, and like that's how you get it through. And then eventually after that is like you keep finding what repeats and what works, and then you need to empower other people to do so. But that's not a sales masterclass. I'm still actually figuring out. I'm still in that learning curve now to actually figure out how to sell. Improving quickly, but still have a lot to learn. But Justin, I feel like this is a good time to probably end off the podcast. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been an awesome conversation. I love the different topics that have come up. We spoke about so much complexity, so many awesome personal anecdotes around your own mentality as a founder. There's been a lot that I think the audience can really take away from this. But I think before kicking it off, there's only 2 questions that I've left. What does the future look like for you? And I don't mean like an existential one. It's like, what does the next 6 to 12 months look like? You can answer the existential one if you want to as well.
That's fine. Is that the last question? Is that the last one? Eh?
No, there's one more afterwards.
Oh, that's fine. That's cool. So I think the next 6 to 12 months will be like a place of discovery, looking at seeing what's out there, seeing what's interesting, identifying some things that I think are going to be worthwhile endeavors for myself to sort of get involved with, which is cool. What those look like, I'm not 100% sure, other than like that mental model framework that I have for it. But there's almost like a confidence that something will come along of interest when I put myself out there properly, which is cool. And as long as it's sort of making a difference, yet allowing me to focus on some of the other important things that I have. There's it's almost like a quiet confidence in everything will be cool over the next bit of time for me, and we'll see what comes. So it's not a hardcore rule. So let's see. It's like the path is somewhere down there. How we'll get there will be a bit wobbly, but that's cool. I'm keen for that.
It sounds like you've got some clarity. It sounds like you've got the confidence in yourself to proceed, and it sounds like you just described what the feeling is of when someone says the world is my oyster. This is what it looks and feels like. So Justin, the final question is, what's the one question that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you that you'd like to answer now?
I would say, what has the impact been on the entrepreneurial journey on the family around you? And I think that journey is one, I think, that gets underplayed around the complexity, difficulty, and strain, I guess I could say, on those, because a lot of the time the work can be all-consuming, and to have somebody that can at least bring you back or call you out or remind you about some other components or other aspects of your life, I think is critical. And without my partner Adi, who's also runs her own business, etc., she's been hugely influential in the level of success. And I think that, like, while we speak about like what founders do the whole time, there's actually a hell of a lot of support structures that sit beneath it that don't get the accreditation or credit they deserve a lot of the time. And I think for me, the family, the support, and all the other things that go around it are materially impactful, especially when it comes to things around that look sort of imposter syndrome sort of stuff, or mental wellness and all of those things. You need like a strong support structure, someone really believes in what's happening, so believes in you, the mission, and everything around that to give you that level of support. And I think unless you have that, co-founders are cool, but you need someone else in your corner, and I think that makes a big difference. And I don't think that's spoken about enough there.
That definitely isn't, and thank you. That's a great one to leave this off on. Justin, thank you for being on the Founder Files. All the best for your next 6 to 12 months of beautiful exploration of opportunity. And yeah, thank you for sharing your story.
Cool, Cameron. Thank you. Appreciate it. Cheers.
More so than any other episode that I've ever recorded on this podcast, I think the word complexity was used a lot. And for me, there's no coincidence that we spoke about complexity so much, and Justin has been able to get the level of autonomy and freedom that he has in his life now around what he's been able to achieve. And the reason why I say that is through the complexity and knowing that and knowing how to handle it as your business grows and scales is how to make sure that you can have the freedom to really do what you want with your time and your business. And this is really why MetaVolve exists and our strategy development program exists, is to help entrepreneurs really clarify their strategy, because you know your business, it's growing, right? It's growing really well. But making sure that the strategy is clear so you have the confidence to give that strategy to your team so you can take the chaos out of scaling and get your time and your freedom back. And we've done this with all of our clients. All of our clients have been able to grow their businesses significantly, whether they were plateauing or already scaling, whether it means increasing net profit by 63% in 6 months or growing revenue by 500% within a year. My favorite stat is actually the fact that all of them say that before meeting Metavolve versus afterwards, they were able to take more time off than ever before where they're actually switching off. And this is me living our mission in action. And this is exactly what I want to be able to share with all of you. And so my team and I will take you through a structured process to help you not only overcome your scaling issues, but also create a holistic strategy tailored for your business, a strategy that's easier for your team to understand, to talk about, and to execute. And by the end of it, you and your team will have a clear roadmap to grow faster and more sustainably. And we're so confident about the value that if after 3 sessions you don't see the impact, you'll get your money back. We get it. It's the nature of this, is seeing the experience of this when you haven't done it before. You kind of want to get a taste of it before committing. That's exactly what we offer you in order to make sure that you can get this taste before going down this journey with us. So if you're ready to grow more sustainably, then visit metavolve.co to book a 30-minute introductory call with me, see how we can help you take the chaos out of scaling. And before you go, remember to like, comment, share this podcast with your network so other people like you can receive the incredibly valuable stories and anecdotes from entrepreneurs like Justin. So until next time, cheers for now.